Welcome to the Experience Sitecore Conversations. We look at marketing trends and customer experience challenges and discuss related technologies and successful implementations. This is Ahmed El-Yamani, Engagement Cloud Product Marketer in Sitecore. So hello and welcome everyone to Experience Sitecore Conversations. In today's episode, we are talking with some of the leaders behind several real cases and success stories who could bring some customer experience projects to life and successfully on track. Some strong business understanding and foundations to different technical ways to get over different challenges and obstacles. So in today's episode, I'm honored to have Kimberly M, Digital Strategist and Senior Director in Acreon. Welcome, Kimberly.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Also from Acreon, we have Steve Lemonstroff, SVP Customer Experience. Welcome, Steve, and happy to have you both.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
So both Kimberly and Steve have a wealth of knowledge and long career in digital and customer experience projects. And they both have talks about Sitecore's customer experience strategy and digital transformation. Kimberly also been a Sitecore Ambassador MVP for the last 3 years, and a wealth of career knowledge and experience between my leading roles in Google, Sitecore, Cognified, before she finally landed in Acreon. Steve got long leadership experience. Been before the 6 years of managing Acreon, you've been a director for several leading agencies, including R2 Integrated and Vertec. So really honored to be talking to you both today, guys.
Thank you.
So maybe we start with you, Kimberly. And I noticed that you studied philosophy and political science. I tried to look at that from customer experience lens and see how did that help you in your customer experience career and understanding of human.
Well, yeah, it makes me kind of laugh that you're asking the question now, because I'm part of a panel at Sitecore Symposium in October, and one of the questions that I'm answering, my answer is, so when we're thinking about experiences, we're thinking about what people want, who people are, what kind of, cultural influences affect them and the experiences we should make. Some of those things, we make very biased assumptions all the time. In fact, the way that marketing technology started was based on segmenting people and creating personas, but in a really biased way. So I can get really caught up in the philosophical, thought process about how we're helping ourselves or how we're self-defeating ourselves.
That rhymes with a lot of the challenge that we're talking about in today's world as well, and the expectations of the customers to be treated as humans. So it's and maybe many of the conventional ways that we've been following for the last 20 years, top of the funnel, down of the funnel, to have another
For sure.
look at that.
And sometimes people don't think about philosophy in terms of, the big philosophers. And, in the world right now where we're talking about privacy a lot and how we manage data and what is ethical and what's not, there's some very, philosophical questions around that, and understanding how can you create environments where people will actually do the right thing, and how will people actually feel like they're getting the right thing. And it's actually pretty complicated. Like, with the data laws that are being created, they're only going to be effective if the punishment for not adhering to those rules are effective. So you see it gets very philosophical very easily.
Quick, and I see the whole thing is connected like a customer trust into brands.
Absolutely.
So that taking that to you, Steve, we talked about now economy, and we talked about regulations. It's like and how do you see the customer experience role in that world of today's world, challenging world? How do you see the customer experience role within organizations' focus should be prioritized in this landscape?
No, that's a good question. Well, it's interesting. When we say landscape, I kind of look at it all like, AC, right? After COVID, at least in my opinion, what we see in the marketplace though is, it accelerated, its need from organizations, right? And so you had the majority of the population sitting at home, trying to figure out this new path and new life for the last couple of years, and their normal suppliers of information and content, such as like the news, media, your Netflix, your streaming sites, that, they ran out of their supply, their inventory, right? And so consumers and people look naturally at their brands that they relate to. Like they went to Instagram, they went to TikTok, like like I'm sure, my 6-year-old knows I use social media now because of, of COVID. And so, you used to go into an organization and say, hey, I'm going to help you guys figure out e-commerce, right? But now, you have to go, and then next step, I'll figure out this, and next step. And now it's like, you have to do all those things all at once, to meet the expectations of today's consumer, today's customer. So, if your plan was kind of focus on one channel and optimize that customer experience, you have to think a little bit more holistically now. Like, how do I work smarter so that I can optimize 4 channels all at once, kill 4 birds with one stone, if that makes sense?
You think it changed the priority of the digital transformation aspect? There's a larger focus on omni-channel and connection touch points with clients. Would be a priority.
I think there's a big shift in, we say digital transformation, but I also say, kind of like the modern workplace, kind of like change management around that realm of digital transformation, right? Because a lot of organizations, especially if you're listening to this podcast, or you're part of the Sitecore community, right? Like you have the technology, right? The kind of classic quote. It's really like, how do we best leverage the technology now? Like, what is the best strategy to move forward, to leverage our, resources? How do we upskill our current resources to be more savvy, to leverage these tools, to kill those 4 birds with one stone, right? It's, it could just be one really smart individual that has a strong knowledge set of how to use a product, like, not to, drop a like Sitecore product, but like, can orchestrate a campaign on Sitecore, work with Personalize and run campaigns. That's a powerful role right now, a very marketable role, in especially mid-market to enterprise.
We'll be talking about like your recommendations and the roles. But yeah, that's an interesting one. Back to you, Kimberly. Following up on that, looking at one of the articles you wrote, and it's about, I think, uncovering crux of issues for transforming the mindset of dealing with customers. It's like, how would you think chief of customers experiences should change their mentality, their mindset, when to cope with today's challenge?
I think it's more important than ever to put empathy at the forefront and to really understand people and what they're looking for, why they need your product. And there's the functional aspects, and then there's, the social impact has become even greater in the last couple of years. I think that's really what the focus should be on, because I think that a lot of personalization, a lot of customer experience is created from the company first. I want to sell XYZ to these personas. And I think that there's that very strong focus of what I want to do as a business, and not enough understanding of, I know that people want my product, but why do they really want it? And how can I present it to them better? How can I make them understand my product more? How can I make them love my product because they can better use it? I mean, if you think about consumerism and how we buy things, sometimes we buy things because we think they're great. I just bought a smokeless grill the other day. I'm sure there was a really good reason for why I bought that versus something else. But on the box, it says there's 4 different things you can do. And so far I've just used one and it's great. But there's that opportunity to sell me on the rest of what this device can do for me, which, if I feel like I'm getting all those 4 uses out of this device, then wouldn't that make me more loyal to that brand? Wouldn't it make me more likely to recommend this product? Right. But I think there's a lot of just, I'm going to sell you this feature and then I'm going to get you to buy it. And then that's it.
So I think there's a shift on the way we should reorder our organizations as well. Seems like the roles of our marketing and sales team might swap, and the customer success. So it's a customer success.
Well,
Yeah.
there's a convergence, right? And in my career, I've, converged both of those sides, and almost for that reason, because I felt that there are different parts of companies that didn't understand, they didn't have a complete view of the customer, right? So working in sales, sometimes you understand what the challenges are of actually getting people to buy. And I feel that very strongly in business to business. But at the same time, if you have a marketing team that doesn't understand your ideal customer, then you'll have friction. You'll be sending the wrong messaging. And so I think anybody, that will watch this that's been in sales or marketing would understand you have conflicts between a sales team saying, I need this. This is what my customer wants. This is what they care about. And the marketing team saying, but this is what we want to sell. This is what we want to market. And this is what we think people are doing. And then the salesperson says, but I'm the one talking to the customer. I'm actually engaged with them. I have a better idea of what they want. I mean, that kind of friction happens sometimes, right? Steve is laughing because he knows,
Right.
he's been there.
Yeah, I see that as one perspective of it. And also operations follow, budgets follow, priorities follow. It's a challenge. Maybe Steve, like what do you think? Like, do you have tips on this? You said, seems like you solved it in your organization and you're consulting for other organization. How would you advise your clients to solve this?
Well, we try to really educate our clients, and if they're going to go down a path of, say, call it quote unquote digital transformation, or rethink the business, or even if it's just, hey, like everyone's looking at us online now. Let's get a better looking, more modern appealing, more frictionless kind of website. I think there's this shift that really needs to be focused on around like ROI, right? Because I hear this a lot of, what's the ROI on that initiative, right? You're going to invest 100,000, 200,000, $500,000. What's the ROI going to be? And I feel like that's a little short-sighted, given how volatile our world is right now, and it's kind of the business case that being smarter about that business case. Cause saying, hey, I want to spend $500,000 on a new website, that's not going to sell it to the board, but by saying, I want to spend $500,000 on a new website that is going to help us, grow into these 4 new audience segments, communicate with them, in a much more personalized manner, right? Ultimately will lead to a higher conversion rate, but I can't give you that number right now, right? Because I have to build it, I have to test it, and then we have to optimize it, and we have to iterate on it. And I feel like there's got to be this kind of model where, of course you can earmark some type of benchmark ROI, but like to ask a marketer in today's environment to say, here's what I'm going to get in return. I think it's like too difficult for them to make that business case, and it's limiting the experimentation and the innovation that comes from the brand, right? Because then the only thing they can do is go back to the reasonable playbook that, is proven, that may produce results at 4%, when this idea could have been maybe 30%. But that's some of the thinking that I've been talking to my clients about, or helping them, like we use our, our analysts to help them give like some data to make the best hypothesis, in that business case, like based on this data, based on this rationale, based on our own analytics, we're making this hypothesis with this investment, and here's what we're benchmarking at. And
So
like
you do deliver them some, you give some numbers as well. Like you don't just leave the room if you,
Nope, it's not, like, finger in the air. It's based like, look, you give you like for instance, this was a bit, I can't name drop the client, but we had a client that was one of the largest, it's one of the largest art galleries in the world. And they're on Sitecore as a platform. 55% of their revenue, is generated through the physical interaction of an art fair, of a massive show in Miami, like an Art Basel. COVID hits, right? All physical events are gone. That is an immediate erasure of 55% of their revenue. Like, what do you do? And you don't know when this is going to end. And so that's a real situation that this company was put in. Luckily 3 months before COVID, we actually just migrated them onto Sitecore now. And spent 3 months training their staff, on how to use the platform. But like, we had the technology, right? Like going back to that, like, classic quote. And so what really helped though is the brand, the organization really understood their audience, right? And they had to figure out, okay, well, our audience just loved, what they went to the physical event for was the experience, the physical experience, seeing the art, touching the art. So how do you bring that virtually? And we couldn't do this as a technology, as help them build and help them, ensure it's performant and the page loads and no one has any issues, right? But they produced some beautiful content, right? Content became their product during this time, not the art. Getting really up close renderings of the art, so you almost feel like you're touching it, but you're not. It's on a screen. And then we basically launched a program of these virtual experiences that ended up being a thought leadership in the art space, right? And kudos to the leader of that company, because if at that time of experimentation, like no one had any benchmarks, no one had any numbers of what the virtual experience would look like or pull in terms of revenue. We ended up selling a $1.8 million piece digitally online, highest sold, luxury item. So we couldn't give numbers, but what we understood was the audience was there physically. The audience was also online, right? And so we took the brand information and knowledge they had, took our tech competency, and we married that to build this beautiful experience that ultimately didn't bring back that 55% revenue, but allowed that company to survive over the last 2 years throughout COVID.
Can you just repeat that number? How much is the art piece?
You heard it right.
It's a $1.8 million customer.
So the customer went online, put it with her credit card number. Wow.
Not precisely, but there's a workflow that you're gonna buy that, inquiry workflow, buy that.
Is this someone that you got the award 2022 Sitecore Partner Award for?
No. So that was the New York Roadrunners. No, not a lot of people know that brand, but a lot of people know the New York City Marathon, which so Icreon is their agency of record, manage their front end, back end systems. They're built on top of Sitecore.
Looking at these two case studies, like I'm impressed with the way you look into the business terminologies and the specifications of your client world. Like because you are still a customer experience, see, you really dive into their world and understand that. Do you see this is an important thing to do, or it happens naturally just when you start part of the analysis?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and that's kind of where I came from, where Kimberly comes from. And in that space, what really matters and what Kimberly, is the customer, right? And understanding the journeys of customers, understanding your personas, right time, right place, right medium, right? Going back to the 4 Ps, all our, one-on-ones. We get the focus on the customer, right? We get the focus on their business, which is why I would say, our entire client roster, I don't know if you've ever seen the show *Halt and Catch Fire*, but there's like a famous scene in the beginning where the guy says, "I'm not going to apologize for being more passionate about your business than your own employees are." Like, that's my favorite line that I tell to the C-suites of my clients, because we truly do learn their business up and down, vertically and horizontally.
Then you try to replicate the same for them, basically. Try to let them understand it firstly to bring it up digitally. I think that would where you Kimberly comes in. I think do you get involved in the implementation and delivery phases, like trying to understand your customers and help them building the awareness, building the personas?
For sure. I can give you examples from, talking to customers early on, coming to us and saying, we want to use Sitecore. We are challenged with creating personalization, and we feel like I've been burned so many times. We, bought this platform before, not Sitecore, something else. And we were never able to make personalization work. And to me, it's like, yeah, I've heard that so many times over and over and over again, of people buying platforms, building websites, launching them, and never really getting further than that. And so to me, first of all, I want to understand, what was your plan like for building personalization? What other data sources did you have? What were you trying to achieve? What does your competitor look like? What are they doing? Does it seem like they're more successful? Or, I think that there's a lot of depth that we want to know at Icreon right out of the gate to understand. So for someone that I was talking to recently, I was basically saying, look, these are the platforms that you have. Here's how all these different platforms could integrate into Sitecore. Here's how you could get more information, throughout the journey. Because when you're talking about personalization and this company's case, they're really, it's really what a lot of people would call, account-based marketing or account-based sales, right? Where they're focused on very specific types of companies and they really need to create a long-term journey and relationship, really trying to understand people early in the process before we even get to the build part.
Mhm.
So, and I think a lot of the time customers come to the table saying, I want to get this platform and I want to build it and I want to do a redesign. And you're kind of saying, okay, slow down. There's a lot to understand first. I mean, I just want to say this for anybody listening, stop trying to put discovery into like a week or two, or just, I feel like people try to squeeze discovery into the smallest amount of time possible. And it's probably where a lot of projects are set up to fail.
Yeah, Steve, how does that impact like the team you build for each project? Do you have a setup for digital rescue teams or
Well, that's a good question. So we're pretty flexible. We try to really understand, the complexity of the challenge that our client has. And depending, we've worked with anything from small nonprofits to startups to Fortune 50 enterprises. And so, every process is slightly different. So we have a typical setup of like a 12-person agile team for your, your traditional, end-to-end, let's call it net new implementation of a platform, right? Yeah. And that would consist of kind of like a strategy, your business analysts, UX designers, certified Sitecore engineers, depending on like what the build looks like, needs React or headless, like you may have a couple of skill sets in there, your DevOps and, QA and everything. There's scenarios where the client may actually have internal skill sets. So in that case, we kind of like try to still meet that need of the 12-person agile team that's going to move the train. But we kind of fit, depending on the skill sets on the other side. So there's been cases where they're like, hey, we got the personas, we're going to do all the customer research ourselves. We just want you to build, and in that case, we found a great way to use kind of like what we call agile-ish. It's not like kind of its purest agile manifesto form. There is a little bit of like a waterfall iteration, the early requirements, like Kimberly said, like, let's not do 2 weeks of discovery, jump into a sprint cycle. Let's try to get a bigger vision for what we want to build at the end of the tunnel. But then when it comes down to like actually getting to the engineering process, let's keep that iterative. Let's keep it predictable. If it's an assignment that's more about, hey, and this is kind of a fairly new assignment that we've been seeing a lot lately. We built everything, now show us how to run, right? Like how do we run everything now? And so that's a little bit more on the strategy side, less more on the technical side, because, just like a beautiful SaaS product, like, you should be able to do everything in the product, right? It's more about how to implement it, how to configure it, what is the strategy there? And that's kind of a different functional team, and outlook, versus the technical side.
Didn't you need to come back to the management and justify the investment that you promised in the beginning and after
Yeah,
some
exactly.
time? Yeah.
Yep.
Like showing some numbers out of the path analyzer, maybe analytics BI tools or stuff like that, maybe.
I'll give you like for instance, we had a client that was a very large commercial insurance. A main question from the top, at the board level, C-suite is, who's our audience that comes to our website? Like they couldn't answer that question, right? They predominantly produce business through brokers or referrals or direct clients, right? But they didn't know if brokers went to the website or if it was businesses who went to the website. So something that we did, like, that when you think about it, when you tear it down, it's really not that hard to set up, but we use the profile keys in Sitecore, like for Boolean logic, just to say like, are you a broker or are you a business, right on the homepage? So then if it was coming to the homepage, they were a broker, they clicked on a broker. And then what it did is just subtly personalized all the headlines. So it gave that instant gratification back to the user that they clicked on a button and they saw experience. But what was more important about that little campaign, was capturing that data inside Sitecore that told us who's coming to the website, because it was critical for the rest of the platform strategy. And we can guess at it, but if people self-profile themselves and just, self-selected, we were like, all right, this is the data. And it came back and it was like it wasn't skewed. It was like 58% was clients, 15% were brokers. but that was still mind-boggling for their C-suite because they actually assume no clients ever went to the website. So it actually shifted a big portion of how they're going to go to market over, and this was like a couple of years ago, how they went to market over, the next 2-3 years with content strategy, because initially they were going to just build a content formula for the referral and the broker business audience. But it's a completely, if I'm talking about like a construction business or if I'm talking about like manufacturing business, like completely different content strategy, themes, topics, voice and tone,
That puts a point again to the customer experience and towards what your audience expect from you. I think Kimberly, I read something for you. You wrote about design thinking sees to understand your customers and react quickly based on that. Build the application, build your solutions in an agile way, side by side with your clients. So, did you get the opportunity? Do you get the opportunity usually to apply these methodologies, the theory within the application? One of the things I think about, other than mostly the A/B testing, like this is the way because you test the experience. What's your take on that?
So design thinking is kind of, I think has become the ethos of what I think about or how I think and how I look at projects. And it really does help steer you towards having an empathetic understanding of somebody. But no matter what, you're still making some assumptions until you're testing things. So this is what the customer wants. But is this going to generate revenue for us? Is it worth the investment, or is that just, hey, sorry, customer, like it's never going to work for us to deliver that experience that you wish you had. But once you start moving down that funnel, you can start applying more of the technology and understanding how to use it or understand what data is lacking. And at some point, you start building testing into it, right? So on a completely different example, I had a client that believed they had an issue with capacity. And I love this story because they had it really wrong in a lot of ways. But they thought if, people, when they're traveling, they want to go to a lounge. That's really nice. People, everybody feels like it's a status symbol to be able to go into an airport lounge, right? At least that's how it was before. And, for credit card companies, it was a way to sell, to a top tier client, like, hey, get our card, you get into this, fancy airport lounge. But then they started sending too many people into these lounges and there's not enough capacity. So how do you feel when you feel like, hey, I'm going to the airport lounge, I'm super cool. And then you get there and there's this queue. Or somebody says, oh, no, sorry, we're at capacity, you can't come in and you don't get to use your benefit, right? And this is what was happening. But the problem was that a lot of people actually didn't care about the lounge. They just wanted the free stuff. And they were going to go into the lounge and be rowdy, and they were going to go open the fridge and take a bunch of cans and stick them in their backpack. And for real, this is what people were doing.
Experience, yeah, for the people.
Right. And so there was this complete misunderstanding about what people were doing and how to redirect people. So the other challenge is you've got to have real-time data sometimes to figure out, okay, do we need to redirect people away from the lounge? Because, it's already paid for in a sense, right? You're already buying this benefit. If you're redirecting people to some other experience, then maybe that becomes another cost, or maybe it's not creating the right experience, right? So you have to use something like testing to figure out if your hypotheses are correct. If there's a queue and it's longer than this number of people, and I can see that in real time, I can see who this customer is, I have an understanding of their profile, can I redirect them somewhere else? And that will maintain the level of relationship that I want them to have with us. Or would they be happy to stay there? They would prefer to wait in that queue and get inside the lounge. Or if I told them, well, actually, if you pay $20 extra, then you can jump the queue or something like that, right? But there's these types of situations where you have to have a really good understanding of not just your customer, but of the peripheral. So I often talk about the optimal value proposition and understanding how what you're doing as a business is impacting your partners and suppliers and your customers, right? In order to create the best experience business-wise for everyone. So you can see I can go off on a tangent on that because I get very passionate about it. So
that's hitting the right point then. So Yeah, and I believe the challenge always be like the maturity, budget, readiness, understanding of the business you are working with, the organization, the institute, and the organization you're working with, to take that on. Especially if we are talking digital, so not queues, be digital queues. Maybe that would be hosting capacity, stuff like that. Like, Steve, what's your opinion on the utilization of AI in this? Like, Sitecore recently, within Sitecore Send and within Sitecore CDP, trying to use AI a lot to help in A/B testing and auto segmentation of clients. You generally, how do you think AI in real life cases could help you, like, deliver these kind of ideas easier to your clients?
No, absolutely. Well, AI is only as good as the inputs that are going into it, right? You got to ensure your data is clean, because like if it's just a bunch of taxonomy that makes absolutely no sense, the AI is just going to spit out a bunch of stuff that doesn't make that. And so, it's a big piece, like before you go down that path of, understanding how you plan on using it. And then you have this AI layer, and CDP and personalize are very interesting to me. Because, now we can say, hey, like, we're going to put you a website and then we're going to personalize in 2 weeks, right? Like, we can just do it, and gift it, right? Like, but, it requires less configuration, and this big,
It's not on the page level anymore. It's
right,
it's
right, right,
decoupled, right?
right. So, and also, the old, if you know how to do Outlook rules, you can do Sitecore rules. Well, no one knows how to do Outlook rules anymore, right? So, but, I find it very interesting because, like, the CDP, like, if you could think about some of the segments that CDP can broadcast into the experience, and then you can kind of personalize off that, or, leveraging your first party data plus third party data. There's some really interesting things that you can do. I'll give you an example. One of our clients is, a mid-market tool company. They manufacture, tools, anything from, like power tools to like hand tools. Um, and, one of the things that we wanted to do is, we were launching a new go-to-market product, is a brand new product. Essentially, it was like a tape measure with a special laser on it. So it combined 2 products in one. It was like, I don't know if you know, like a distance measurer type of laser distance measure. Well, yeah, I don't have to sell you the product, but it's a good product. But one of the
That
things
seems
that we
like
wanted
working
to
with you is
do,
fun.
yeah. It's your natural, it's your typical manufacturer, distribution dealer relationship. So they sold in Walmart, they sold on Amazon, they sold at Target, they sold at Ace Hardware, right? Pretty much any big box retailer had this product. And so when you went to their website, as a brand, it would say like where to buy, right? It would send you like to go to Home Depot, go to Lowe's, go to Ace Hardware. What we wanted to do on the landing page for the website to drive more foot traffic to their distribution partners, was use, customer data platform affinity relationships in terms of the segments. Because actually we found a data set that could tell us, based on doing some research, and I'm not gonna give away any IP, but like, I could tell you if you have more of an affinity to buy at Home Depot versus Walmart. And then what we did is we used that data on that landing page, to pull in the reviews from Home Depot, or the reviews from Amazon, or the reviews from Walmart, like the stars and like how many sales they've had, to personalize that landing page experience for where you were likely going to buy the product. And what we actually did see was an increase of 12% to 48% on our click-through rate to the vendor to drive the traffic, right? Which was the KPI of the campaign, because it was about driving foot traffic to the point of sales, not to direct to customers. So it's just interesting, that was a true example of leveraging like CDP data.
Yeah, it's interesting case, because Sitecore is trying to build generalized cases of this, but you build your specific thing. That's lovely to know. Like, yes, Send, for example, trying to do that, but more in a more generic case, like identifying the more prospective, profitable segments. But yes, because if you know the business domain and the specifications of the customers, then you get.
Sometimes you can just do it very, that doesn't have to be this big horizontal and vertical personalization strategy. Sometimes it can be very tactical. Let's say you have like a form on the page, a landing page. If I filled out that form before, Like, why are you going to show me the form again? Like, use that state to show me new content, show me something new from the brand or the organization, right? That's like a very simple personalization rule that anyone that owns like a product can configure. Or if you have like a press release or a news, like time-based rules based on what date, like you can do some cool things on that page, if it's like an event, and the event passed, like change the landing page now to show content for the fact that the event no longer exists, right? Like, those are very simple tactile things that you can do today with the systems you probably own if you're listening to this.
Here you go. Just like minutes before we go, started getting these tips from you. So really thank you guys for all of these insights and knowledge. Before we go, I have a couple of, like, I will not say questions, a kind of section trying to embed big cases and big problems and challenges facing our world today, from economical challenges to war to climate change to poverty to a lot of things, digital overuse and stuff like that. I'd maybe give it to you now, like for a minute or two, each of you could pick one of these things like really worries you, and how do you think us as technologists and customer experience leaders as at least a few steps to make world a better place? So Kimberly, maybe.
Well, I mean, in line with the panel that I'm going to be on at Symposium, where we're sort of going to be touching on diversity issues and inclusion, and what we need to think about in terms of how we're creating experiences, personalization, and so forth. I think that there's a lot of societal changes that are happening. They're very diverse. They differ depending on where you are in the world. I mean, I've lived in 4 countries, and I see that in these 4 places, those issues are different. They have their own personas in a way. I think we need to get better at being able to talk about these issues. We need to get better at understanding what may be true in our backyard isn't true for everybody else. And, I think just that idea of making the world, including work, more inclusive, where we can communicate more easily, I think that's huge.
Diversity and inclusion, definitely doubling that. So thank you, Kimberly. Steve, maybe?
The like degradation of of our attention spans is something that we need to be concerned about. There was a time where the entire internet was enamored by 6-second videos, not just 30-second videos, right?
Yeah.
And it was like the creation of Vine, which essentially got acquired. So now we don't have 6-second videos, we have 15 seconds.
Yeah.
But it's a challenge. Like, it's both an opportunity and also a challenge, because you could produce less and get more, right? Like, if you could figure out the equation right in terms of your audience and their attention span, serving them an email that doesn't have to be a 10-article newsletter, right? It can just be a paragraph of information that they find valuable. And a key of like delivering that perspective or what you're trying to say as short as possible, as distinct as possible, and on the right medium is a challenge right now. That's something I'm just definitely, we work, especially in B2B in certain industries. It's like, how can we leverage the power of some of these mechanisms and like rethink some of that? It's definitely a challenge for how, when we move forward over the next couple of years.
Interesting point and then perspective on it. Thank you so much on that, Steve. It's like, I'd like to thank you both actually for accepting this invite. It was a pleasure talking to you. Wealth of knowledge on the subject matter and tips, starting from environment down to the technicalities, and hopefully our audience would like it. So any last thoughts before we go? Like maybe a recommended read anyone share with our audience?
I just recently read an old Sitecore white paper about digital profiling that's still very relevant for how to set up digital profiling. No, we're excited. iCreation's represented over, we're going to be at Sitecore Symposium, Kimberly and I both. We're a sponsor. We have a few different tracks. I'll be speaking with Johnson Controls, major B2B manufacturer. Kimberly will be speaking at a panel.
Okay, yeah, right. I felt that on.
And Paul, our colleague Paul Miser, is also going to be speaking. I think he's speaking on Ultra Fabrics. And speaking of books, he has a pretty good one on digital transformation. So you can Google that.
Check that out.
I think it's called Digital Transformation in the Infinite Loop. I know I have that almost right and not perfectly.
Okay.
So.
I put that in the description.
I love it.
And I dig that out and put it in the description. Thank you so much for that. So thank you again, and please, for our listeners today, also firstly make sure that you follow Kimberly McCabe on her interesting newsletter on LinkedIn if you're not in the symposium. If you are, please go and say hi to the guys and make sure that you attend their sessions. And please stay tuned for our next episodes, where we talking about marketing and business challenges and how technology can help get us realistic solutions. And don't forget to subscribe if you like that content. And if you have any feedbacks, please let us know to make things better for next times. Thank you so much, and talk to you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.